Hey everybody, it's Locke here with Co-Optimus, and we are looking at Act of Aggression. It is out now, and it's a really cool classic RTS for you to check out. It's built in the vein of the golden era of RTS, the 90s and the noughties, where you are heading into some of the world's most volatile conflict zones, building bases for mass production, establishing those resource supply lines, and waging war. So let's take a look at what Eugen Systems, the guys famous for the War Games series, and see what they're bringing to the war table with their explosive new RTS. The formula is pretty standard. Over large realistic maps, players will harvest resources, build up strategic bases, defend them, and produce all kinds of units to match the wit of your opponent. Now let's take a look at the three distinct factions, the first being the US Army. Now, although they are still the most powerful military machine on the planet, in Act of Aggression in this time period, they're a shadow of their former self. Their style is definitely really cool because they are brute force in Act of Aggression. They are veterans. They can really skill up in specific roles and being the best in a really particular thing. If you want to go all out air or all out ground or all out vehicle. And they don't have a ton of versatility, but they really do one thing well if you want to tech up that way. Next up, we have the Cartel, and the Cartel plays a lot like the any terrorist organization or the shadowy international organization that kind of controls the politicians. Now they're the antithesis to the US Army. They're planning the downfall of the US government. Now the Cartel, they are stealthy. They are born out of private military contracts with the latest and greatest prototypes. However, these units are very fragile, very expensive, but they do have stealth and secretive, sort of deceptive tactics on their side. Definitely something that is a little more difficult to master than, say, the US Army. And finally, we are left with the Chimera, or the Chimera Protocol. And really, the whole world has kind of plunged into this recession, forcing them to form this coalition force called the Chimera. They're this task force designed to have a plan in mind for every situation, and the way they play is really versatile. Versatility is the name of their game. You can mold their units through upgrades into specific roles, or leave them sort of as a jack of all trades. So they're not specialized in one thing until you upgrade them that way. So three distinct factions, three very different types of play styles. Now, where Act of Aggression really shines is in the detail here. The maps are all based on real-world locations. You've got cities, deserts, both rural and urban environments, and all of the military technology is based on, prototypes that we have now, which is kind of cool to see them come to fruition. Where Act of Aggression is different is in things like the resources. There's three different resources instead of just one, and each of the factions utilize these resources differently. You're going to want to protect your supply networks, and really you can take someone out even before the fight starts by taking out an unprotected refinery or something like that, which is really important because that is reflective of an emphasis on economy in this game and not just fighting, which I think is really important. Another important point where Act of Aggression kind of changes the style of RTS is bringing back the strategic base building in style. It's not about building your base as fast as possible, but it's actually building it as strategic as possible, which I think we don't see a ton of these days in RTS games. You want to anticipate the units you'll need and the path through the tech tree, all while managing where the space and the income, electricity, and establishing those supply lines. It is actually very important of building placement, which isn't necessarily seen in things like StarCraft or Company of Heroes. Now, each faction definitely has their own style, so you need to know what the enemy is capable of in order to build your base and units accordingly. I found it a bit tough to navigate through the UI, especially in game. Trying to figure out on the fly what unit counters what and what they're good at is tough when you have to read a paragraph of text. It would be definitely better to just have sort of a symbol or icon right on the unit as you're building it to know, this is anti-air or this is anti-infantry, especially when you upgrade them and put those specialized, loadouts on some of your units. it'd be nice to just see a little bit of a cleaner UI to navigate. There's just so much information thrown at you, and it's tough to navigate, especially in the middle of a match. Sort of where active aggression is lacking in comparison to other real-time strategy games is probably in the unit skills. You're not going to be doing a ton of micro with your units. They're not casting spells or anything like that. It's more of, strategic positioning and definitely that financial, macro edge, versus, like a StarCraft where you're casting spells and that sort of thing. The closest skill you'll see is like a smoke bomb that will cover your units. Other than that, there's not really any specific skills for individual units. So if you're looking at active aggression and wondering if this is for me, I think it's a really good real-time strategy game. We haven't seen something like this for quite a while. And if you're a fan of those Command and Conquer games, it's definitely in your wheelhouse. If you are a diehard StarCraft or Company of Heroes fan, one of those, more involved real-time strategy games, you're not going to find that sort of... It's not the same. It's more of a macro game, if anything. But I really like the three different factions. They all play very differently, which is nice. And there are some little things that active aggression does differently than anyone else with, the banks and the resources and the capturing units and that sort of thing. So it's definitely worth your time checking out for real-time strategy people. It might be a bit overwhelming for someone just getting into the genre, but I think overall definitely a thumbs up for me, and I think you should check it out. So that's active aggression. It's a great strategy game, and we'll catch you guys later.